just to start with, I'm going to tell you what this talk is about, because it's not exactly obvious. So this is the making of the EVE arcade machine that we have down in the game room. We made a little arcade game, called it EVE Offline, just made in the EVE engine itself. It's basically, you could call it a mod. It's just EVE client running slightly different code. And yeah, it's a shooter, very much based on things like radius and R-type. And it's fairly fully featured. It'll take a while to complete it. It's got 4 levels. And that's what this talk is about. We deliberately made kind of a silly title so we wouldn't give away the surprise. So hopefully you're here for the right reasons. All right, so who are we? I'm CCP Foos, tech artist and prototype maker. I originally came here to work on the character creator, and this is... I'm
Snorri, CCP Snorlax. Basically worked on any sorts of...
Oh, they didn't activate.
Am I not on?
Oh, anyway, yeah. Snorri is an engine programmer that worked on the Trinity expansion and does a lot of low-level engine stuff. In this case, he helped me out with some of the modules that I'm going to talk about. All right, so why was this made? And this is basically my defense of how can you possibly be spending time on something like this? And it's basically like that. When I work on EVE, it's often to make prototypes for upcoming features or to try them out. And we already have a pile of those. So there was time. When I had some time between projects, I pretty much just made a little prototype, showed it to people, and they gave me permission to mess around with this until Fanfest. Also, we needed some kind of a simple test case to try out some modularization stuff that we've been doing. Basically, controlling stuff through Python, including graphics and stuff, running it outside the EVE client itself. This game runs inside it, but you could run it completely standalone. Also, EVE just has a lot of assets that people typically don't view up close, so that was just another fun side effect. And of course, we just wanted something fun and weird for Fanfest. The inspirations for the game are obviously R-Type. R-Type's the biggest one. Then there's games like Radius and Ikaruga. Now, I couldn't make it into a real bullet hell game because putting thousands of bullets on screen didn't quite work. The engine wasn't made for it. And also, I couldn't do hit points because I wanted to limit playtime, so the game just kills. That's all it does. It's very, very hard. But it's free to try out, so definitely try it out. But don't get too angry if you get killed, because everyone does. We think it's completable. There's only one guy that's really close to doing it, but we're pretty sure it can be done. And yeah, R-Type is a bit of an inspiration. If you compare these two screenshots, both are from level 3 of each respective game. Yeah, the Titan in EVE Offline even has a face. Kind of. So why is the game so difficult? And that was basically just came down to old school heritage. If I did, hit points, just became a little too easy. You could play it pretty much forever. And the old school games, they were designed to just keep people pumping in coins. And they did this by killing people repeatedly. And hopefully, they killed you in such a way that you learned something from it and got a little further each time, and someone got rich off all the quarters. And in our case, we just wanted the game to be a bit snappy, so more people could try it out. The first time you play it, don't worry if you get killed within 30 seconds. That's pretty normal. So how was it made? Basically, Trinity, the graphics engine for EVE, it's very, very flexible because space scenes are a relatively simple thing to render. You don't need too much occlusion and fancy stuff. So making it do new stuff is relatively easy. You basically just go into the tool that we normally use for tweaking ships and levels and stuff, and just run a slightly different script that takes over the camera and makes ships come at you and shoot. And yeah, so that's the easy part. But of course, it's not nearly enough to make a full game. So the first prototype version of this was done 2 years ago, just in a few hours. It was just made to see, can this be done at all? And it was a fun little test. People had a laugh. Then between projects, a couple of months ago, I decided to take it a little further, implementing basically one boss fight, because a shooter that has nothing but ships flying in straight lines gets boring pretty quickly. And I was still curious. There's so much stuff that can go wrong when you try to bend technology to do something it wasn't built for. So I made a boss fight, and this is the early prototype. It was made in about a week or so. Can we play this back? So yeah, as you can see, no sound. The ship is an APOC. The power-up is way too big. The collision has almost no precision, and all kinds of stuff. But still, if you play this game, the fight itself is almost identical. It just has a lot more effects, shaky cam, and craziness. So anyway, but this was the clip that kind of sold the idea. All right, you can have a few weeks to do this, but you don't get any help. So basically, I had a few weeks up until Fanfest, and I had to try to make the most of that time. The biggest question, I guess, was, do I make any tools? Because if you're just hacking code, it's pretty easy to make stuff work by just making everything in code. So you say, okay, put out ships at 10-second intervals and just randomize them or whatever. But that just wasn't good enough. Basically, I ended up making a level designer because, yeah, I didn't just want a one-level, little tech demo. And I wanted to be able to tweak stuff without, risking breaking everything all the time. And, so basically, because there was such limited time, I had to figure out what to hack and what to make for reals. There were a lot of little things that could fail. If I couldn't have gotten any sound, that would have been pretty bad. If everything ran really badly, that would have aborted it too. So basically, yeah, make real tools, but still try to do as much as possible in the first weeks. So, so if there was a big showstopper, at least stop before we waste a bunch of time. So here, about the graphics. So the project really didn't have any official support, by anyone else. It was pretty much, it started off as just me in a corner playing around. So I didn't really have access to engine programmers to fix bugs that I ran into or anything like that, and absolutely no artists. When I asked, they just laughed. So basically, I had to kind of beg, borrow, and steal to find assets, and that was actually a lot of fun, just weeding through assets and figuring out, I need an enclosed level. Do we have anything that looked like a wall? And so on. And, lots of abuse. Things scaled up by 1,000%, scaled down, reused. Stargates are used for the most weird stuff in here. But actually, that was pretty fun. And I ended up getting some help in the end. I'll get to that. There are some new graphical tricks in there. Some of it just came from prototypes that were already made. The blur and exposure post effects, stuff like that. And I actually got to borrow some engine programming time to get the kind of depth of field effect. It's not this extreme in the actual game, but yeah, it was pretty important that you could tell what was foreground and what was background, so you knew what would kill you and what wouldn't. So about the level creation. Yeah, the only sane way to do this, because there are 4 levels, and they're not super long. I think you can finish the game in like 7 minutes if you go through everything. And basically, when editing a level, it looked kind of like this. And this doesn't really tell you a lot. These are actually the waves of level 1, but they're all compressed. It's because the whole game is scrolling, and new enemies come in all the time. And obviously, they weren't moving that fast from the start. It would be impossible to make any levels. So they just wait there parked until they get their signal. Start, you go. But it's actually kind of hard to see it. So it became really important that I could play the game from any point in time to try out this wave and that wave. Is it too hard? Is it too easy? Do I feel stupid playing this? And so on. So the level designer actually ended up being a lot more elaborate than I meant to. But it pretty much paid off. The enemies, they're really just tiny little state machines with an event track, so that, at 1.2 seconds, you do something, you say something, you turn around, you shoot at the player repeatedly, and so on. 15 different event types, and they ended up becoming more and more programmer-like. There was one that just says change state, and it could do pretty much anything. But yeah, it turned out to be necessary, especially for some of the special cases like the bosses. Now, about the engine, if there's one thing about EVE that's not extremely high fidelity, it's probably the collision. The collision is pretty approximate. It's run on the server, and that kind of stuff is pretty heavy. So it was all just spheres to begin with. Of course, that wasn't enough for the game to work properly. So basically, we decided to use a third-party library, Box2D. That's the same library Angry Birds uses. So essentially, what the game is thinking behind the scenes is that every ship has these little polygons around it, and that's used to figure out whether you hit them or not, whether they hit you or not, and so on. And it was all just done, through Python. Now, Snorri is going to talk about how to do stuff like this, basically taking an open source library and making it work for you, but you want to do everything through Python if you can. And it turns out that you can. Now, the bosses in the game, they're really just, typical coin-op fare. But it was pretty important that they at least had some unique gimmick, each one of them. So basically, when they were created, they all started out as massive hacks, code that was run only for them, and so on. But then they typically just got dismantled, For example, the prototype, as you saw, contained the Avatar Titan with some hilariously oversized turrets. Turned out that turrets were a pretty useful thing to be able to bolt on to pretty much anything. So that got extracted, and that entire fight actually got rebuilt properly once the tools were in place. So really, the only special case boss code is really stuff to track if the boss is alive or not, pretty much. One of the bosses consists of something like 9 ships, so yeah, needed a bit of special case for that, but that's pretty much it. Everything else was pretty much standard by the end. And yeah, so here are portraits of all the bosses. Slight spoiler alert. But yeah, sleeper, spins around shooting lasers. Pretty much anyone can get to him because he's just level 1. Level 2, the Avatar, some turrets, big beam. Level 3, tribute to level 3 of R-type. Big Titan, takes up maybe 3 or 4 screen lengths that you just need to harass until you can finally get him to turn around so you can shoot him in the head. And the last one, and this one may actually never be seen because he's pretty hard to get to. I call him Ed 209, and you'll see that he's really just a walking robot made out of ships. So the music was a pretty fun chapter of making this game. So I had access to everything that EVE had access to. That was the stuff I could get to very, very easily. So I could say, play this piece of music, play back this sound effect. Except the problem was, even if the EVE music is pretty awesome, it's also a little bit calm, ominous often, but fairly calm ambience. And the sounds could be a little hard to sync up because most of them, are run pretty predictably, which means that they don't need to respond to Twitch movements. But anyway, when I was dealing with the music, I basically asked our sound guys and our trailer guys, so do you have any music for me that I might be able to use? And so I have some clips, and I think so if we play clip 1. I basically sent them a link to this. And I asked, I need something a bit more like this. Do we have anything like that? Yep, you stop. And the trailer guys really delivered in spades. So play this. So, you know, reuse music from our trailers, but I was hoping that because there's a lot of other stuff going on in the trailers, maybe no one would notice. But anyway, so this is the level 1 music, which I think is pretty awesome. Okay, play clip number 2. This is level 3. It's just one big boss fight, so I wanted something that started off quickly. More trailer music. I like it. Okay. And the last one, the boss fight music. All right. Yeah, I really like that one. You can probably guess where it's from. But yeah, I was so happy when I got that music sent to me. I was pretty happy. Makes the game sound like it cost $1 million to make. So about the code structure. So there's not going to be any super hardcore code talk here. But I figured if anyone's interested, you know, that isn't at the dev track, I figured I'd mention a little bit about it. But yeah, it's all Python code, object-oriented, but a very, very simple hierarchy of stuff. Pretty much, I just have something called entity, and the level's full of them, and it has way too much functionality. The subclasses are really just optimizations and special cases. You know, I've got bosses that have, you know, weak spots, weapons, stuff like that, and bullets, which didn't need a lot of code. Another thing that I learned pretty quickly was because we had a dev environment where I could change the code pretty much on the fly, globals were a really bad idea. If I put anything in a global variable and reloaded anything, it just got nulled out. So, you know, music disappeared, graphics disappeared, didn't work out. All the data in the game, both stuff that goes in and out, is just saved to YAML. Nice little library if you use Python. I think it exists for other languages too. You just take any data and just dump it out and load it back in and just use it. You don't need to do any parsing or anything. And the whole thing is around 5,000 lines of code. Now Snorri is going to talk a little bit more about what the code is doing, and he's going to specifically go through how we make the C++ code a slave to the Python stuff. So you can make an entire game using Python if you just have the right libraries to mess with. So the stuff that went right in this was pretty much mostly that there were no showstoppers. Because I was pretty much on my own, and I wasn't really allowed to go pester people to give them to give me a bunch of time to fix my bugs. I really had to try to find this ahead of time, and it all worked out, amazingly enough. Then the CCP Sharkbait, my favorite person in the world right now, he really took care of business on the hardware side, and you know, pestered people for me. I was working remotely, so I couldn't just walk into people's rooms and demand they do something. So he did, and he basically built you know all the hardware inside the arcade cabinet. He got like 10 times more hardware power than we thought we would, and we just kept upping the specs. Bigger speakers, more power, and it's awesome. And of course, running up playtesters. We just put it up internally in our game room and invited people to play and had, you know, a little mailing list for people that wanted to help out. And that worked out pretty nicely. And of course, the music. I was so happy about the music. Made it so expensive. So stuff that went wrong, of course, there was always, you know, a humorous bug or two. The little drone that could, you know, some drones that follow you around, that really didn't know when to quit. So they would follow you all through the entire level. They'd join in the boss fight pretty much. Because, yeah, they had no sleep criteria. And I didn't discover it until pretty late because I was used to just shooting them. But if I didn't, yeah. Titan waiting in the wings. Level 2 Titan had a little bug that made him wake up way ahead of time before he was supposed to. People kept telling me that he was way too easy, and I was like, what? He's got like 10,000 hit points. What are you talking about? Well, it turned out that any stray bullets from your fighting would actually reach him way at the back of the level. So chances were he'd be half dead by the time you got to him. The one-handed test runs, that was basically me when I was trying things out in the game. I'd started getting reports that, oh, this is too easy. You know, this guy goes down way too easy. What are you talking about? This is actually pretty hard. I made this, and I can barely do it myself. Then they sent me some footage of themselves playing, and the first thing I heard was like machine gun fire. Yeah, they were firing about twice as fast as I could. I typically played with one hand, so I was moving the ship around and firing with my thumb. Yeah, 3 or 4 shots per second. No, they were doing 10. So I nerfed bullets. And the busy GPU, that was actually something that was found the day before launch, yesterday. It turned out that the renderer was actually rendering everything twice. That took down performance a notch. It was still okay, but it fluttered a little. Very, very annoying. So I got some help in debugging it, and yeah, felt kind of silly. But I was really happy it happened, because it runs pretty smoothly now. Then, of course, there's the thing that, you know, getting close to launch, you know, the discipline started deteriorating a little bit, you know. I started just editing text files and stuff instead of actually fixing my tools. So, you know, if there is a continuation for this, some poor soul is going to have a hard time, yeah, fixing bugs and fixing levels. We'll see. And one thing I did was I tried to do it so that the level that I saved to disk and loaded back up is the same structure, it's the same data that I use when actually running the game. Terrible idea. Because, yeah, basically as soon as I attached, you know, like 3D graphics or sound and stuff to entities, everything stopped saving because there's no way to express those in text files. So, yeah, terrible idea. Don't do it. Make a save format. Then there's the arcade box. Because, you know, when the game really started to take form, people got interested and they got really excited, you know, to help out. So they actually got a budget to get an awesome illustrator to make, you know, the box and the logos and everything. And yeah, I'm really happy with the way that turned out. I'm really thankful that guys basically just grabbed their time out of their schedule to handle this stuff. Yeah, the webcam, that was actually an idea from CCP Sharkbait, because we wanted there to be a high score list, but a 3-letter initial, you know, even that, it takes time to type. It takes time to type in using a joystick, and, you know, there's no way we can identify anyone based on 3 letters. Are you SAT? So we tried using a webcam, and that worked out pretty decently. Then Sharkbait made the website backend, so the website is on a screen right next to the arcade. It is updated live, and it is, if you look at the URL, it's just a web page, and that web page actually exists. It's actually open. So if you're in tough competition for the top spots, just make sure to write down the URL, bookmark it. That way, you can always track if anybody's beaten you yet. And yeah, there are some devs in there now. I think we're going to throw them out. That's cheating. They've been playing it for a month. And during development, we had you know, internal dev testers. You might recognize some of them. By the way, that facepalm I have in the corner it's genuine. It was something very, very stupid. So yeah, you should say hello to these guys when you see them. And you know, lessons learned. I mean, pretty much the #1 lesson is, you know, if you know your way around the Trinity engine, you can get it to do pretty much anything. Python is also a very, very convenient language for a lot of this kind of stuff, because data manipulation is pretty much what it was built for. Very easy to save stuff, very easy to grab stuff from disk. And you know, it's not super fast, but as long as you're on a PC, it's fast enough. And the most surprising one is Unicode is absolute poison. So here's a Python lesson if anybody's ever doing Python that requires performance. If you generate names from file names and they turn into Unicode strings and you start comparing anything against them, performance will tank. First time I had a real level with a full set of enemies in it, everything just ran like crap. I ran it from a profiling session and I kept seeing the same function again and again. It's a decode, 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 decode. That was pretty much all that was running. And that was just me checking if the name was correct on something. So is your name enemy 1? Oh, that's like a millisecond. Thanks. So yeah, Unicode is poison, but anybody that ever touched it probably knows that. And yeah, that's the end of my part. Now, Snorri is going to talk a little bit deeper about the programming topic, and then we'll have a QA. We'll actually have plenty of time for QA, for Q&A. But if you have any really hardcore programming questions, just come talk to us afterwards. Because, yeah, we'll be here.
So is audio on now? Can anyone hear me? Right, so
Yeah, we'll do a switcheroo.
all right, how about this? All right, so now you're stuck with actually listening to what I say. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we use Python and C++ in our environment, and yeah, why do we mix the two together? So Python is great for rapid development, as Foos pointed out here earlier. You know, he can be running the game and change code and just continue running the game and see the changes take effect immediately. But on the other hand, C++ is kind of needed for any sort of system development. It's really hard to talk to things like DirectX and other low-level APIs directly from Python. So basically, we are stuck with mixing the two together. Then again, C++ can be kind of hard. Turnaround time for changes is on a different order of magnitude, really, from when you're working in Python. You have to compile and link your program, and generally you have to restart. There is, you know, you can stop the program running, do some edit, and continue, but it's of a very limited nature what you can do. Python. C++ also has very strict typing. It's really, I don't know how many of you are really programmers in here, so you know, if this is way too technical, then just bear with me, this won't be long. If it's not too technical enough, then by all means talk to me afterwards. But yeah, in C++ you have very strict typing, so you know, an integer is not the same as a floating point number, etc. So other things really, it's easy to make mistakes that crash the program. In Python, you generally cannot write any code that crashes. You may get exceptions. The program may not do what you wanted it to do, but it won't crash and burn. C++, if you don't know what you're doing, it will crash and burn within seconds. And things like memory leaks and so on, again, something that Python just takes care of for you. So we really just try and get the best of both worlds. We develop the app itself in Python and do the graphics engine and other low-level stuff in C++. So enabling programmers like Foos and basically a lot of programmers that can do basically whatever they want in Python, and they're in a sort of a safe environment. Whereas you have maybe then more sort of, well, people that can focus their experience in C++ and they know the dangers and they know what they have to do things correctly, and they just focus on those low-level bits. So calling C++ from Python has some complications, and Python, for one thing, is not really a typed language. It uses what's called duck typing. So basically, if you want to call a function in some class, it doesn't have to have a specific signature or, you know, be pre-declared as something special. It just basically, you know, the duck typing means if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it is a duck. So you just call it and it will probably just work. So that means that if you're calling from Python into C++, you need to do a lot of runtime checking and conversion of arguments, since, you know, C++ is really strict. It wants exactly this. You can't just pass it whatever. If you want to call a function that takes in a floating point number, you can't call it with an integer. It has to be a floating point number. But Python, you know, you might actually just call it with a string and, you know, expect it to work. So we need to do a lot of runtime checking and conversion. And that means on the C++ side, when you're accepting that sort of a function call, you have to write all that code. Which is basically a lot of copy-paste, which has potential then to, you know, you make silly mistakes when you're writing very similar code, but doing it over and over again. So let's take a closer look at just a very simple method taking in one argument. This is like one of the box2d methods. You want to apply a torque to a body in box2d, and that's taking in a floating point argument there and doesn't return anything. So on the C++ side, this is the code that I would have to write. Any function that I call from Python basically has always the same signature. It's taking in the self, which is the object you're operating on. It takes in the arguments, which can be basically anything. I have to deconstruct that on the C++ side. So, I have to parse the arguments there. If the arguments don't match what I wanted, I return a null pointer that tells Python that this is an error. Then this one line of code there, this apply torque, is the function that I'm actually calling. And then I have to return none. Let's take a look at another sample, slightly more involved. Now we're taking in an argument that is a tuple. It's a pair of two numbers. And I want to return, again, a pair of two numbers. So even more code in C++ that I have to write. And I don't want to go into all the details here. It's very similar code, but you could still make errors there that will crash the program. And so basically, we've decided we don't want to be writing code like this. So we've come up with this thing called blue exposure, which is our mechanism of exposing C++ to Python. It's basically a set of macros in C++ templates that generate all of this code for you. And the fact that the compiler is generating it for you means that it will do the right thing. Once we've set it up correctly in the first place, it will do the right thing every time. And C++ programmers don't need to learn the details of the Python C API. So all these functions to convert arguments and from Python and back to Python, some of them have pitfalls. It's very easy to make mistakes, either start leaking memory or even crash the program. But doing this sort of automatically means that it's consistent, and once we've fixed any errors that come from that, then they are fixed everywhere. So this function, like the apply torque, this is the function in C++ that I would be calling, and then all I have to do in C++ is have this macro in the sort of right environment that tells blue exposure, expose this function to Python. And this basically is replacing all of that code that we were seeing in the slides earlier. And so the other example, again, we just have this function in C++. This macro, the map method and wrap, is exactly the same. It figures out, okay, this is a function that, one function takes one floating point argument, doesn't return anything. It creates the appropriate Python wrapper for it. Here's another function that takes in a vector2. It knows, okay, a vector2, I want to basically return that or work with that as a tuple or pair of two numbers. Yeah, so maybe wait with this a little bit. So this is basically stuff that we use now for all of our C++ classes. All of Trinity is using these sort of macros, so we don't have to write, manually write all this code to go from one language to the other. And for box2d that Vigfús mentioned earlier that we're using for the arcade game is I basically use that also as my proving ground, since as Fus mentioned, I think a couple of times, he didn't really have any official support from any of us in making this game. But I was working on expanding the blue exposure to make it handle more things automatically, and decided to use box2d as basically my proving ground, and that just happened to be useful for Vigfús. So that's sort of how you sneak in the things that you want to work on, regardless of what you're told to work on. And I managed to actually get enough. The blue exposure is now handles all the cases so that there is, in my wrapper for box2d, there is no call to the Python C API that I directly wrote. It's all handled by the Blue exposure. And yeah, these examples that I'm showing here are very simple functions. We can also handle more complicated functions that take in lists of things or maps or dictionaries and stuff like that. But so maybe a valid question would be, why are we doing this all of ourselves? There are alternatives out there that do sort of similar things. Both you have Boost Python and something called Swig, a couple of other things. But maybe one of the main reasons is simply that this started out almost, well, basically 10 years ago, and has come a long way since then. But so we've never really, and yeah, there weren't really any alternatives back then. So at the point that Boost Python came into play or Swig, then our stuff was already as good, and no reason to change. And basically, also today we simply prefer our own syntax. Maybe it's just what we've gotten used to, but it's also, in many ways, it is more feature complete and requires less code that we ourselves have to write. And then also the persistence mechanism, how we save all of the objects in the game, it ties into this. We use this also to expose the attributes of objects. So when we save out an EVE ship, it's saved in a YAML format, and the mechanism to save out there, it uses this setup to extract what it needs to save. Also, maybe one thing we did try actually using Boost Python. We've spent a couple of months really sort of redoing a lot of our low-level stuff using Boost Python until we just finally hit a brick wall. It just did not work out for us. Some of that had to do even with the compile times and the size of the executable using Boost Python. Boost Python is a template library that can really, it bloats your code. And our compile times were getting to be orders of magnitude higher than what we used to have before. So we had to back out of all of that and decided, okay, our time is better spent improving our own library rather than trying to use Boost Python. But this is low-level stuff like this is stuff that I spend all my time on at CCP, so I could talk about this for hours on end, probably put you all to sleep, but I think I'll just stop here. Like I said, we'd be happy to take questions. There's a mic here out on the floor. If you want to ask Vigfús about any of more stuff about the arcade game itself, if you want to ask me about some nitty-gritty details in C++, either ask them there or come talk to us afterwards. So let's open up for questions.
Am I on again? Is my mic on? Ah, cool. So as you can see, the sleeper boss used to have 8 beams. People complained that it was impossible. It probably was. Yep, go ahead.
Hello. My name is Tim Eriksson from Green White Inc. Let's theoretically say you actually finish the station environment. Would there be a way to mix this into the game itself, like have a arcade thing?
Yeah, so this is already running inside the EVE client. So, running it inside there should be relatively simple. Running it elsewhere, a little trickier. Officially, nothing is going to happen. But if you pester the right people, Unifex, Siegel, then who knows? Because, it exists. We have it as a nice little test case, We want to make a version that runs just of pure Python, that doesn't involve EVE and just uses everything else as modules. If we can do that, then that's awesome. That's a great test case. But if enough people are interested in some kind of home version, at least some of the platforms are pretty easy.
Okay, thank you.
One of the points that we wanted to make with this, one of the reasons why we wanted to make a game like this is something that Vigfus and I have been talking about for quite a while. Is we just wanted to see what would the reception be. Is there interest out there in silly little games like this that you could either play inside of the EVE client, or it could be just standalone things that you could download, or maybe even on other platforms than on PC.
You can never have too many games, especially old school ones. They're a dying breed these days.
Yeah, go ahead. Maybe use the mic so that everybody can hear the question.
All right, hello. Oh. So I only have this question because I did try the game out a little bit. Why do shields not completely seem to work? I know in a lot of old school games, when you get a shield or when you activate it, you're pretty much completely invincible, but you seem to die no matter what touches you.
Right. So the shield, it could have been complete invulnerability, but since you have so many of them, that would have allowed you to just bypass, the hardest parts. So yeah, I mean, it was really just a design call, and it is a little unfair. I know it. I should have, I didn't have time to actually make the shield blink and warn you when it was going to go away. It lasts for 3 seconds, by the way. So if you count down, you'll know. But yeah, the shield was made to survive bullet storms. It works for that. It will catch any bullet, not beams though.
Yeah.
It will catch any bullet and any enemy that you can kill with a single shot. The shield does enough damage to them that, for example, if you use the shield through the entirety of level 1, you can actually dive through pretty much anything. Well, except the mini-boss and the boss. So yeah. I mean, it was designed to be, good but not great.
Cool. Thanks.
And the Smart Bomb, it just does a ton of damage to everything. It's not enough to kill everything, though. But it does damage to everything, including bosses.
Any more questions?
So yeah, I mean, I could also just ramble about random stuff regarding it. Unless there are any other questions. But basically, I mean, this was really just done for fun. First prototype done 2 years ago. A lot of people looked at it, and it was kind of cute. But it wasn't until now that we got permission to do something real. And of course, we had no idea how far it was possible to get in such a short time. But yeah, I mean, it worked out decently. Mostly because I don't have to do the C++ stuff. He handles that. I can just pretty much do anything, Typically, I can just write a new set of functionality, without ever playing it. Code for maybe half an hour to an hour. And because Python is very, very easy to write, there's like a 50% chance that most of it works. A couple of bug fixes, but I don't even have to stop the game to try out the new code. It's very convenient. Basically, just code it live. And when you can do that, you can actually make some pretty quick progress and try out pretty stupid things, because some of them turn out not to be stupid. We have a question?
When will we see more games like this? More non-EVE related, non-EVE functional development.
Did you ask when we'll see more? Well, if there's enough interest, there's all kinds of ideas that we've been throwing around, And yeah, the entire engine works like this. I mean, one idea that I had was, in-kernel combat. Mortal Kombat with EVE guys. That would probably be a bit more complex, but that's mostly because I'd need an animator.
So,
but yeah, we can make an RTS with EVE ships, pretty trivial, and all kinds of silly shooters.
So, will there be any more? Will there be any dev blogs on this, or follow up? Where do we give this kind of feedback that we want more games like this?
A dev blog is a great idea, and it's something we could definitely pitch. I mean, most of the stuff is written down already, so I don't see why not. And yeah, basically, just pester the high-level people here and say, oh, this is pretty cool. Let's do more. And yeah, anything can happen.
Cool, thanks.
Hello, my name is Mordred. My question is, what about an RTS game involving planetary interaction?
That's a good idea.
Yep.
Hi, have you ever considered that you have actually found the business case what to do with the captain's quarters?
I don't think we're the right people to answer that question.
Yep.
Yeah, hi. I remember from Fanfest, was it 2 years ago maybe, when you showcased like an RTS game inside captain's quarters using kind of small robots thingies.
Oh, yeah. Slay.
Yeah. Things like that, like, are they based on the same technology, or is that a whole other thing?
It is all running in the same engine. Now, Slay was actually the biggest difference between Slay and a game like EVE Offline is really just that it happens indoors. The indoors renderer is a lot more complex than the space one, because the space one is mostly just drawing ships and rocks hanging in space. The indoor stuff needs a lot more optimization so that you're not drawing stuff that's around a corner, that kind of stuff. But it's not it's not super complicated. If it's okay that you see everything at once and you don't have giant levels, then yeah, it's possible.
And the obvious follow-up would here, what happened to Slay?
I honestly don't know. I think it maybe has something to do with the previous question of the business case for Incarna, but I really don't know.
I only know bits and pieces of that story, and it is very tragic.
I generally try and hide in C++ land and just work on code.
But yeah, I mean, there were programmers that lived and breathed Slay a long time and through many revisions, only to see it, I guess it never officially got dropped, but they never saw it get born.
Thank you.
But actually, the environment now is a lot more friendly to smaller games because everyone's got tablets. And guys that have messed around with tablet games and gotten used to them, yeah, they're actually pretty nice. I mean, me personally, I play way too much of them, and I'm surprised. I definitely turned my nose up at that kind of stuff when I first saw it. But now, it's pretty much all tablet games and the occasional Steam thing.
We're also... Well, something that I've been, stealing time and making time for is getting some of our low-level tech to work on other platforms. So enabling us, at least at some point in the future, to do more of our, EVE-related stuff on other platforms. So, there are definitely, we are open to just, finding out what works best for you players. What do you want to do in what sort of environment?
And they're a ton of fun to make.
Regarding other platforms, are you referring to things like Linux? Are you thinking of doing something with OpenGL instead of DirectX on the game engine?
We have internally, the Trinity is now running both on DirectX 11 and in OpenGL. So, who knows? We need to talk to the business people, when it makes sense to put more effort into making that into something shippable.
And, there is a real business case for GL because that's what the Mac runs. Yeah, I mean, porting stuff over to the Mac version of the game would be a lot simpler if that were, made fully functional. I think we're just about running out of time. Let's take one more question.
It's just a comment, actually. If you guys consider any other games, Mind Clash from the books would be pretty cool.
Yes.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.